Jannat, the moderator of panel. I'm lecturer in Department of Biotechnology, University of Kotli. My specialization is plant breeding and molecular genetics, and my research is based on the genetic improvement of legumes. Well, being native to the mountains of Kashmir, I'm an eyewitness of the success stories and the issues here. And I have been a practical part of the agriculture in these fragmented lands with least logistics. Women of this region are directly involved in agriculture in terms of kitchen gardening, field crop cultivation, and animal rearing. So, truth told that there is really need to make agriculture better livelihood for people, especially women of this region. So, it's an honor for me being a lead panelist of the World Forum, as Women of the World is a global platform to connect the women from the diverse domains on wide range of subjects, including arts and science. So you all know during this COVID pandemic, when there is wave of social distancing around, bringing people on one table is really a great challenge for us. So these kind of interactive sessions on such issues is a very good initiative. So as you know, throughout the world, sustainable farming is one of the challenge, and agriculture around the world is most powerful tool to end extreme poverty, boost share prosperity, and feed projected up to 9 billion by 2050. So you all know that more than 65% of the poor working adults depend on agriculture for their livelihood. And it is also an estimation that more than 40% of the women in the world are also linked directly with the agriculture. But agriculture driven, you all know that agriculture driven growth, poverty reduction, and food security are at risk. And there are multiple factors for these risks. We have, we all have a common goal to feed more than 9 billion by 2050, to improve livelihood of the people around the globe, to fight with the poor nutrition by adding balance and balanced diet in the nutrition of the people, and to conserve obviously water and the biodiversity in our planet, and to respond and manage the climate changes in the world. So to discuss all these broader domains, we have featured today very dynamic women from diverse areas to talk about the inclusion of sustainability in agriculture today. So we have Dr. Sahar Hasnain with us. Dr. Sahar Hasnain, I will give brief introduction of on the panelists today. Then we will start talk with each panelist. So Dr. Sahar Hasnain is a research and community coordinator for Foresight for Food initiative based at Oxford Environment Change Institute. She has her research domains on food system disruption, urban design, and regional and formal food system transformation. Another panelist from the World Bank, Dr. Viana Parago. Dr. Parago is an economist at World Bank. She worked in agriculture, food system, rural livelihood, and competitiveness. And she has been the part of the community in some American countries in like Guatemala. So we will have very good experiences of her during the talk. And another dynamic real woman in the practical agriculture, Miss Sahar Iqbal. She is an agriculturist and publicist managing a farm, and her farm employs more than 200 female workers in southern Punjab province of Pakistan. So she has been also training in the Australia Award Women Trading Globally program. And we have another very dynamic lady, Dr. Fawzia Parveen. She is a postdoctoral fellow and adjunct faculty at Center of Water Informatics and Technology housed at Syed Babar Ali School of Science and Engineering at LUMS. And she has completed her DPhil in Engineering Science from University of Oxford. So we have a diverse domain of the women in agriculture, environment, and economists. So it's a great pleasure to have you all in today's panel. So I will start today's discussion from Dr. Sahar Hussain. So she will be here to give us an idea about the food system as a whole regarding the production and nutritional aspects. And she will obviously talk about the impact of climate change and demographic changes on the sustainable agriculture system. And she will also let us know about some of the strategies about the sustainable and regenerative production in Pakistan. So, Dr. Sahar Hussain.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jannat. And I'm really privileged to be part of an excellent panel. And I'm looking forward to literally what everybody else will say. My PhD is in environmental sciences, but my focus is on the future of food systems. So I'm very much a big picture kind of person. And I know that the theme for today is harmony and sustainability in farming. And to contextualize this, I will use food systems quite a bit. And what that means in our look at everything related to food production. So that means not just farming, not just livestock rearing, but everything that takes the food product produced by farmers and amazing people in livestock, but throughout the entire system through distribution, logistics, warehousing, processing, wholesaling, all the way to the consumer and then beyond into disposal. And the reason we do that is so that we can find better and more effective strategies that work for everyone in the system. So as Dr. Jannat helpfully said that, more than 1 billion people are involved in the world of farming, and a very significant proportion of them are women. But at the same time, it is important to also know that there are another couple of billion people who are involved in the rest of the food system. So these are women who are part of the processing world, the distribution world, and where a lot of the effort isn't always acknowledged or accounted for when we're talking about improving food security and sustainability outcomes. So that is the context that I'm coming from. So I know that we have very knowledgeable people speaking on farming for that area of expertise to Sahar, because she will speak on this a lot better than me. But again, the idea is that especially for a country like Pakistan, when we are talking about securing in a way that is helpful for everybody, not just farmers, but every single socioeconomic group in the country, we're also securing our environmental future, because we have to think of generations that still haven't been born yet. So this is taking into account about the impact of demographic change, climate change, political movements, everything that has an impact on food. And that is quite critical, because we can't just look at harmony in agriculture, but we have to make sure that whatever harmony we're striving for in the area spreads out across the entire system, that our other infrastructure in the country is set up in a way that is beneficial for people on either end. Whatever farmers are producing, it is and incentivized. So we're accounting for food waste, we're accounting for sustainable diets, and infrastructure that is energy efficient and effective in all possible ways. So let's talk a bit about climate change. So again, in Pakistan, we have high levels of ability to climate change impacts, and that is something that affects farmers, but also affects the rest of our food system. We all know that there's huge disruptors, especially in natural disasters and climate change impacts across our systems, and any impacts that happen on infrastructure is something that is going to affect billions of people across the world. And COVID definitely has already shown that. So I think that is one thing that we really have to consider, that whatever interventions we're striving for is something that then has a systematic impact that is positive and sustainable for everyone involved, but also make sure that we're thinking beyond generations. I'll say a bit more about direct and unintended effects, because usually what happens is that a lot of our incentives are tied to very specific aspects of our system, but we don't always see what that will have in terms of the socioeconomic impacts on other groups, environmental impacts, or just whether or not the thing we're suggesting works for all the people involved. Are we, in fact, trying to keep farmers in situations that they want to get out of? So maybe it is a matter of thinking of training farmers and other producers in our food system to do other things that they might want to do. So they are very, very difficult questions, and especially difficult for our context as well, given how many people are involved in food production. So all are issues that we have to think about. And I think, like, especially when we're talking about farming systems and especially women in farming and trying to harmonize all of these things, we have to think of the resilience and sustainability of the food system for many generations to come. And that will mean making very difficult decisions at all levels and all sectors. I think I'll stop that there, Dr. Jannat, and hear from our better, panelists.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Dr. Hasnain. So, obviously, I would like to talk about the current situation in the UK after Brexit, as UK is, they're for agriculture, they are mainly dependent on some of the European imports. So, how the UK is managing there after Brexit in terms of agriculture. So these kind of things could be helpful for us to design some strategies for the countries like Pakistan to meet the problems or the challenges we are facing in our agriculture system. So can you give some inputs regarding this?
Thank you. Yes, that is a very excellent question. And it really highlights that we usually look to other developed countries as places that will have the answers for our problems. And what we can definitely learn from the Brexit context is that Pakistan has a perfect opportunity now to leapfrog and, jump transition pathways in a way that will be beneficial for us. While Brexit on the whole hasn't been great so far in terms of production for the UK, and partly it is because how the policies post-Brexit are going to be implemented. So essentially, as a very, very brief summary of a very complicated process, a lot of small and medium enterprises and small farmers and small producers are going to suffer quite a bit. We can already see that with some enterprises already being shut down and farmers suffering because they have lost out on a fairly well-established market in the EU. But they are now learning on just what they will have to change in terms of personal and commercial strategies. So one example is that some fish producers whose like the entirety of their production would be exported to the EU, and now they're seeing how to change their practices to cater to a more of a British market. And I think like they're also making some critical decisions in terms of like environmental protections available for farmers and incentives. So if farmers are doing regenerative or conservation or nature-based activities at their farms, then what is an effective way to keep doing them and to incentivize them in a sustainable way? What we can learn from this example is that we really should be thinking in a way that is more integrated when it comes to food sovereignty and food security for Pakistan, and to really emphasize regional trade in a way that is sustainable. And again, that's a very difficult situation for our context. But to really think about what do we want food in Pakistan to look like over the next 20 to over 200 years. And, we have to protect the interests of current generations and future ones.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Dr. Sahar Hasnain. So she gave a quite good insight into the policy making for next 100 and more than 200 years for the future to make agriculture sustainable for our generations, obviously. And obviously there will be inclusion of the women, and that is a necessary part. That inclusion of women will make it more harmonized and more sustainable for the future. Thank you so very much. So I would go to Dr. Viana. I just need to know, Dr. Parago, that as we have the fragmented land here in Pakistan, and we have very small holders of farmers here. So how to link smallholder women in the farming to the market, because we are facing the market problems here. So what are the examples in the societies you are living, that how to link that smallholder women in the farming to the market?
Thank you, Dr. Jannat. That's a very good question. So I work for the World Bank in the food, agriculture and food global practice in Latin America and the Caribbean. In the countries I'm working on, we also have a very substantial presence of smallholder farmers. If you think about it, in the Latin American and Caribbean region, agricultural land is 760 million hectares, of which 400 million are devoted to family farming and smallholder farming. This means that family farms account for an estimated 50% of all food production in Latin America and Caribbean. Now, given this framework, several countries in the region I'm working in are seeing a gradual increase in the role that women play in agriculture. In countries like Barbados, Brazil, Ecuador, women currently make up around 30% of the agricultural workforce. And in other countries in South America, such as Bolivia or Peru, this percentage is even closer to 40%. So that's a significant presence of women in agriculture and food systems. Having said that, women really lack an enormous amount of gaps to their effective participation in agriculture and food value chains. One of these is invisibility in the first place. If you think of a country like Guatemala, where I'm substantially involved in, if you look at data from the agricultural census, you will see that that women in agriculture that women reporting being employed in agricultural, performing agricultural activities, make up 10% of the agricultural labor force. However, if you go slightly deeper than that, and you start considering women who report helping their husband in family farming activities, or doing some agriculture-related works, or helping the family activity, helping the business, you will see that women make up 40% of the entire agricultural labor force. So this is a substantial amount of women that are invisible to official administrative data, and therefore are invisible to any action that targets them. Other complex issues that these women face are informality, precisely because they are not reporting their activities. Informality is a huge issue in general for smallholder farming, but it's particularly significant for women. Other problems that they face are earnings. Women in agricultural world really, in many cases, don't earn any salary at all. Taking the example of Guatemala, 57% of female agricultural workers do not earn a salary at all, and of those who do, 97% earn less than the minimum wage. So it's an incredible disparity of points of start that really affects the trajectory of women and their inclusion, as you were saying, into agricultural value chain. And then there's a host of other problems, such as access to productive assets. First of all, land and other agricultural inputs, access to extension services, different levels of human capital. By human capital, we mean a host of different concepts, but we can even just focus, for example, on education. Women have lower access to education, primary education, but also higher education and access to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths disciplines, and therefore this impedes their access and their effective participation in these value chains. So and I mean, I could go on forever. We see very high levels of gender-based violence, which are particularly significant in rural economies. And again, the lack of accurate data is another problem that seriously hampers any activity in this respect. If you look at official data, you will see that gender-based violence is much higher in urban areas. Is this true? Not really. The point is that women don't have access to ways of reporting the situations. If you go and you do qualitative data analysis and you conduct focus groups or case studies, you will see that the problems of gender-based violence are much higher in rural areas. The point is just that women have no ways of reporting that. So this could go on forever, but my point here is what to do to ensure effective participation of women in agricultural value chains and making them the protagonist of a transformation, a sustainable transformation, as Dr. Hasnan was mentioning. It's really focusing on the gaps that they face. You cannot really put in place any strategy. You cannot set arbitrary quotas unless you really go and tackle the specific barriers that women face. Are there barriers in terms of education? Well, let's work with young women. Let's work with families. Let's try and shape the mentality. Let's try to really bridge the gaps that make that women do not want to send women youngers to schools. Let's work on the perceptions. Why is a woman not deemed apt to studying engineering? That doesn't make any sense. This panel is a testimony of that. So there are lots of barriers, and there are lots of very specific actions that need to be taken into account. And given this framework, also it's important to consider, this is something that I really care for, but it's like the country specificity and the context specificity of what you're doing. So you really need to learn the context you're working in, and then put in place actions specifically directed at targeting those issues. And I will stop here now. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of room for discussion.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Dr. Parago. Yeah, it was really thought-provoking that you mentioned some of the gaps in the practical forming of the women and to its advancement, like education and the formal documentation of the women forming in agriculture. So these are some of the aspects which are really very important, which need to be addressed around the globe to involve the women substantially in the agriculture and to even acknowledge their role in agriculture as well. So, being an economist, I would love to ask you another question. That world is moving towards now smart farming, which involve more technological things like artificial intelligence or some other technologies. So, how in the developing countries like the Southeast countries, how we can make the economic viability of this smart farming in our agriculture area?
So that's an excellent question again. And when you talk about economic viability, you really need to address specific issues. So digital technologies and in general, like technology adoption in agriculture is one of the biggest developments we are seeing right now. And technologies have a big role to play in shaping agriculture and food systems that can really be sustainable, environmental friendly, and can really shape a transformation of agri-food systems toward better outcomes. However, again, ensuring that this work really needs to take into account issues of adoption of these technologies. Of course, if you focus on commercial farming, big farmers, these actors have a key role to play, and in certain cases, even policymakers consider them as more natural actors and or counterparts in this kind of discussions, because, for example, they farm higher plots of land. So of course their impact is very high because you can convert to sustainable use like much higher plots of land. However, if you really want to set a transformation of agri-food systems, you cannot really left smallholder farmers behind. And this really means, again, bridging gaps. I'm sorry I focus on gaps, but that's really an important point that we see in our daily work. For example, if you focus on digital technology, 50% of the population in Latin America and Caribbean don't have access to internet, and don't have access to any connectivity at all. And this is a very crude measure. And if you go across countries, but even within countries, there are even higher disparities based on geographical location, gender, again, education, socioeconomic dimensions of various nature. So you really need to ensure that the people you are targeting these technologies are really in the position of using them. Again, I just want to mention a case study I'm leading in Guatemala. We are running a pilot, and we are developing digital technologies to increase market access for women we call them agripreneurs. We don't want to call them farmers because we want to set a transformation of mentality. So they're entrepreneurs. So we're working with smallholder women agripreneurs in Guatemala. And we're developing digital tools to increase their market access, and especially to link them to a school feeding program that the government of Guatemala has been running for years now. So we're developing in partnership with the World Food Program an e-commerce app specifically targeted to this market, and also in partnership with FAO, we're developing digital extension videos that make them able to really access the opportunities that opening of this market will create for them. However, a big problem that we're facing is really lack of digital connectivity. We're developing all these technologies, but then how to ensure that they can use them. So it's about really making sure that they can really leverage the opportunities that are made for them. So in this case, of course, this is a really small pilot, so we are not really in the position of lobbying too much for future bigger change. But of course, in this case, something that would really need to be done is improving connectivity again, but also, in the shorter run, we are really trying to leverage producers groups and the social capital within communities so that women can be the ally of each other, so they can socialize the information among them. They can create alliances, they can work in partnership, just so they can all be lifted together. So this is really something important. And again, if you want to think again medium term, it's about again improving the education and the level of access that women have and smallholders in general have to this technology, the exposure that they have. For example, it's also about making these technologies in a way that is usable and user friendly, so that it can be really accessed by the beneficiaries that are supposed to use them. For example, the applications that we are developing in partnership with the WFP are being constructed in a human-centric way, so they're being validated through various iterations with actors on the ground to ensure that they can be actually used and they can be efficient and really solve the problem that they are intended to solve.
Yeah, it was really nice to hear some of the case studies of Dr. Prago in Guatemala regarding inclusion of some digital technologies in the agriculture system. As you know, agriculture is more labor intensive, and for women, when they have multiple roles in their life, it is one of the main focus to make agriculture less labor intensive for the women. And more to develop more earning opportunities for the women, and that could be only possible by giving access to the digital the system to the women, and also to the education, more education, obviously, which I got from your talk, that we need to educate more and more women regarding this, that women will come into the policy making, and they will come into the use of some advanced technologies in agriculture. So thank you so very much, Dr. Parago. We have Ms. Sahar Iqbal, and as I have given her introduction previously, that she is a practical farmer in southern Punjab. So I would love to hear from you about agriculture entrepreneurship in Pakistan, because we really are lacking the entrepreneurship in Pakistan at smaller level, and then we can like expand it to the in the wider perspective. So, what do you what are your experiences with the women you are working, and give us the insight about the entrepreneurship in the farming in Pakistan, Mr. Iqbal.
Hi, everyone. So, let me begin my story. I might not have the knowledge or, the research that you guys and the wonderful woman on the panel must have. So, I just did my bachelor's in literature, and it was like totally an off the record thing. So, what I did when I got married into the rural setup, I started out looking out more opportunities over there. Being confined into four walls wasn't my destiny. So there was like more to, more. I really want to bring more to the table and really want to, bring change over there. So women empowerment was one part that I really want to focus on. The ladies who were working in the field, they had the exposure, of the first hand knowledge that I might not have. So I tried to, gain that knowledge from them. talking about sustainability in agriculture, we started off with community development. When we got the land from our parents, it was a waterlogged land. So I didn't even know the term what is waterlogged. So I started doing the research on internet, and then we came to know how to make those waterlogged land up into a productive land. Then I started off with the concept of community development and then corporate farming over there, and how to increase the sustainable increase the livelihood for the women over there. So we started off building our own land, and we could see that the women and the people living over there, they don't have the access of, they were living in the mud houses, and they don't even have the access of a stoned or brick made house. So it was like a good experience for me, because coming from urban setup to the rural setup, and I was totally shocked. So what we did, we started off with the community development. We started off with making their own houses into with bricks and kilns, and there was no gas, there was no electricity. I did research on biogas. We made a biogas system over there. Now they are with the, so, and then there was, I read somewhere that there is like some government is giving some subsidy on solar systems, so why not to make them sustainable? So we started now this village is now producing their own gas, their own electricity, and the women over there, we started off educating them, and doing different engagements with corporate farming. We are producing crops over there like potatoes, and now we are giving it to the corporate world, and this has actually increased the better wages for the women that are working over there. So there are so many techniques that we started off with. The water saving techniques, we have used the drip irrigation. The concept of drip irrigation was totally new for those people, that okay, we have to save the water, but we have to educate the community as well. Then we started off with the concept of the mulcher, because if you all know that in southern Punjab, there is a concept of burning the residue of the crops. So I was totally engaged this idea, and we actually thought of very different ways in which we can educate these people not to burn off their crops, because it's really hazard to the environment. So what we did, we introduced a new technique known as mulcher. So instead of burning those residues, they are using those residues into a fertilizer sort of thing. Then rows and furrows were made, and so many other things, and to educate I believe, in terms and as an entrepreneur, I think if you are growing in a community, you should also take the community along with you. You should also make them learn along with yourself, that we all owe this to mother nature, and this is our responsibility, right? If I can bring a change in this community, if I can create so many opportunities for these women who actually don't have the access to education. There is no school in that area. So it was a very difficult thing to make them understand the power of the education. But now, with the passage of time, they know that if they will make their generations educated, they will create a difference, like I am trying to create a difference over there. So yeah.
Great, Miss Sahar Iqbal. It really ignite a spark in me as well to serve the community in terms of agricultural practices. As I'm also doing some projects on agricultural crops, but still, I think it should outreach to the community. So I think you have seen the real problems of the people in that region. So. For the policymakers, what are your suggestions that which are the missing gaps which need to be addressed in the farming community, and how the policies, sustainable policies, can assist the women in the farming in the rural areas, and obviously not only women or the farmer, because you have the direct connection with the people who are farming practically.
What I believe, that there is a total gap in the market as well. in terms of farmers, male or female, regardless of the gender. We produce the crop and then there is no market to send it across. And then, sometimes it's why I indulged myself into corporate farming was that there was no rates in the market that, you can even bear the labor cost. So it was very exhausting. I think there should be some policies like not only to educate people, but also to create such market for the farmers where they can, give their crops at the rate at which, they are producing. Honestly, I will tell you the time when we were actually producing rice, and then there was no market out there and we could not even bear the cost price just because there was fluctuation in the market. So there should be some ways, and there should be, some gaps in which the government should work. And I know government is giving subsidy on technology, and I have also, gathered some really good things. I have bought rain gun and etc. And through this I am also sharing my knowledge across the community as well. And people are also, trying to adopt those modern technologies. But it's just, one man show. We need to be send it across to the community. We need to share it to the community. We need to make them learn. And especially if agriculture is such a strong sector in Pakistan, especially in southern Punjab where I am coming from, and women have a massive role to play over there, right? So we should be doing something, some skill working development, some courses for them, right? During the COVID time, I share with you the people over there, they did not even know what COVID is. And a lot of my community men, they were working in the rural in urban setup, and they came back to the village, and we did some very amazing exercise with them. We also were learning from internet, and we were actually make them understand through internet as well. These are the other practices that you can follow, and you can increase the productivity. So there should be different ways. The government should be, making people learn or introduce different things over there, especially the agriculture department, especially for the women out there. They should create some opportunities for them, some business for them, at least fund them in agriculture. There are women, I have seen them working, but on a very lower level, right? You can always you can give them a back, right? They need, if they need in terms of funding, in terms of learning, just government should, do something, or should develop some model that actually they can actually help the women out there to grow.
Great, Sahar. Your inputs really made the talk amazing. So now obviously you made the agriculture more efficient. You did efficient agriculture during the COVID pandemic, and what kind of protocols you opted during this pandemic? Can you please put some light on that?
Since I have told you that when I went back to my village, and along with my community members that came from the urban setup, I also was clueless. My husband was clueless as well. What to parameters we should follow, what protocols we should follow in the field, because it was the time when it was too. It was the time when we were actually doing the paddy rice thing over there. So it was, and it was so moisture was there, and you cannot put the mask on all the time. So what we decided, that we will invite the laborers in small groups, and they would be working 3 to 4 hours with limited amount of the female farmers in the field, like 4 farmers with a special social distancing. We made sure that, and hygiene was one of the issues, so we actually made sure that they follow the hygienic protocols as well. And when and they were working for 3 to 4 hours, and then the next shift started. A lot of the women, they were actually very, they were very crying about that probably we are going to cut their wages since we have shortened the time. But we didn't do that, because it was the time when we should, we thought that we should start giving it to the community. We will earn in the coming years, but this is the time when our community needs it. So instead of shorten their wages or cut off their wages, we give them full wages. But we did it like 3-4 hours. 4 of the women were working, and then later on the shifts, we divided the shifts, and this is how we followed the protocol. Social distancing was one of the key factors that we followed across our farm, and still is.
And that's great, Ms. Sahar. Well, Yeah. So thank you so much for your thought-provoking talk. Now I will come to Dr. Fawzia Parveen, and obviously Dr. Sahar talked about Miss Sahar talked about the conservation of water, using drip irrigation. So you are an environmentalist, and your specialization is specifically on water. So I would definitely love to listen from you about the water conservation in agriculture, and then definitely you will put some light on the harmonization of agriculture and the role of the women in harmonization of agriculture and the sustainability of agriculture. So, Dr. Fawzia Parveen, over to you now.
Thank you, Dr. Maya, and everybody else for setting the stage so well. Before I answer your question, I would sort of like to zoom out a little bit and reflect on the title once again, because I think that it was very important in the way it was conceptualized, because we're looking at Mother Nature as Mother Nature. We are also looking at Mother Nature as a gendered entity that is being used and abused continuously, so that we could take as many resources from Earth and then bring it to our benefit, forgetting that we're also exploiting it. And the same model sort of replicated with women in communities. So I think for me, platforms like WOW are important because we can come out of our science for a little bit and then indulge into these discussions as to why we always just think about the people who are living on the planet but not about the planet itself. And I want to talk about it because you speak about water, right? Water is one of the many natural resources that the ecosystem is providing to us. And in the end, it becomes a useful resource for us. But how many times have we put ourselves outside and just looked at the earth and its ecosystem and the ecosystem services as a service that we should all just sit and be grateful to, and a service that we owe back to nature, which is to make sure that whatever we're disposing into the planet is also clean enough for it to sustain not only generations but for the planet itself. So of course, water is an important component of agriculture. Without water, there wouldn't be any agriculture, well, traditionally speaking. So in Pakistan, because there is water-intensive agriculture, we have data says that up to 90 to 95% of the water in Pakistan is being used in agriculture. So it's the massive consumer of fresh water in terms of all the other sectors. So despite such a big population, despite being pollutants in terms of the industrial waste as well, it's actually the agriculture that's consuming most of the fresh water in the country. And when you look at that consumption, up to I think 70% of that water that's going into agriculture is being wasted. So clearly, like, we could conserve there, and if we conserve there and make sure that the water or the input or the agriculture in itself is less input intensive, we can keep and the agricultural practices are water efficient. That way, we can not only keep the water clean, make its use efficient, but also keep our planet clean. So altogether, I think it just depends on how we change not only the practices, so practices that are close to nature, where Sahar mentioned some of the techniques like mulching and things like nature-inspired agriculture and bed and furrows for water conservation. That they're all really important. But there was something that Vivi mentioned as well, which is about looking at context to understand exactly what is needed where. So, for example, drip irrigation might be a very important innovation for countries that are water scarce. But places that have enough water, we may not need drip irrigation because it's extra knowledge, it's extra education, and it's extra capital that a lot of communities may not afford. So, for example, in my own village, which is, of course, upstream in Pakistan, in the mountain communities, we are very water rich, and again, most of that water is going towards agriculture. So when we practice agriculture, there are also then other areas in the mountain community where the water has to be lifted from the river because they're at a height. And in those cases, because there are regions where there's no water, we can rely on technologies like drip irrigation. So you uplift using the natural flow of the water to a place where there is no water, and then using drip irrigation efficiently grow your crops and grow your trees and so on. So I think both the practices, the knowledge, both old and new, can complement the way that agriculture is being practiced. And just to reiterate some of the things that have already been said, like many other places, like I think anywhere else in the world, women in my part of the world cannot own the land, because traditionally the land has been given to man, and the woman is just supposed to marry into the land. So whoever she marries, she gets to then have that land. So that there's that issue. It was already stated that women are their job is not paid. So all of these women who I know, who are doing a lot of work that is very time intensive. So for example, a lot of physical intensive work, which is required for shorter time, is done by the men. But for de-weeding, which is all done manually, and it's easier to say it, I think, because you think, okay, you're just de-weeding the weeds from a, let's say, potato harvest, but to sit there all day and taking each weed manually, and to be sitting there under the sun, under the harsh weathers, it's not easy. So to calculate for those hours, to make this job a little more thankful, that if you do not own the land, if there is no credit given as to your participation. So just like, again, something that Vivi had said, that women are up to 70 to 80% of the women are actually excessively involved in the area of agriculture. But when it comes to participation in decision making, less than 20% are involved. And I think that is unfair, because you are excessively carrying out all the tasks, and not just the tasks in the field where you are complementing what the men are doing, but also what's being done at home. Because, for example, once you harvest the wheat, beating it, or other vegetables, beating it, threshing it, taking things out, cleaning it, storing it, putting it into the store, all of that inside job is, I don't know about the South, but in the North, most of it is done by women. And there's absolutely no credit to that. And this is on top of the household duties that they have to do. They still have to cook, they still have to wash, they still have to clean. So on top of all of that, they're also expected to do all of that thankless job, where they simply don't have a voice. It's only, and another unfortunate thing is that those women are not, they're not healthy. So despite the fact that they're producers of food, they are nutritionally, I think they need a lot. So even their crops are nutritionally not diverse. So how do we go to these communities and train them not only for agriculture, inclusion in decision making, proper education, but also to make sure that those women are not malnourished, that they give birth to healthy children, and then those healthy children can be healthy human beings in future. So I think it's of course, a very broad debate, but I would just like to reiterate what everyone else has said. And I also think that women should have opportunities to microcredit. Women should have opportunities of being schooled. Again, like how Sahar said, that she became the school in her agricultural community in southern Punjab, because she was all that they had in terms of what they could learn. So I think those opportunities need to go to these communities, farming community in general, but female farmers in particular, where they would have more and more skills to acquire gadgets, to acquire technology, to acquire practices that can make this practice efficient and environment friendly and nature friendly as well.
Thank you, Fawzia, for such an conclusive talk. So, as I know, you're also from very remote area of Pakistan. I just also want to know about the problems farming community or the women are facing in the mountains of your region, and like what are your experiences as far as your native homeland is concerned?
Yeah, I think like you rightly mentioned, in the remotest of farming communities, the entire community sort of suffers more compared to rest of the farmers. But you can look at it in multiple ways as well. For example, the women in Hunza are far more better than the women in Sindh, who perhaps are not only not owning the land, but are also working for a bigger landlord who is not paying them or underpaying them. So at least in the case of women in Hunza, or female in agricultural practices in Hunza, you have those women sort of owning the land. At least it's a land that their family owns. Unlike a family that's under a ruler or a landlord in Sindh or anywhere else, where they get to make the decision, and they, the wage gap is so wide in these communities, and some of the women don't even get paid because they work as families, and then only the male leaders get to be paid. So for us, I think in terms of comparison, broadly, I think we are all right. Actually, we are one of those communities where a lot of barriers were stepped aside, and women were working in the fields for a very long time. Long before some of these developed areas had women in the field, women in the north were known to just put their scarf away and go in the field and do as much as they can, which is something I think that was unacceptable in many other places. But it is not easy. And I think what makes it difficult is the access to information, access to technology, and access to, I think, microcredit, etc. And then finally, access to the market. I think, to me, all the hard work that they do, all the efforts that they put into crop production, when it comes to finally selling it, when it comes to, on the day of earning, I think if you multiply it by all the cost that they spent on the input, all the time that they spent in the field, I think they're always in a deficit, because in the end they have this limited cash where they have to teach their children, so they have to pay the school fee, they have to take care of the health, and and oftentimes they compromise on their own needs. So the mothers, if they have any health problem, they will subside it and say, let our kids study first. So they wouldn't go to a hospital if there's need to go to the hospital. So oftentimes, they have to make a choice as to where this limited money that they can earn from agriculture is going to go, and that comes at the cost. And I think this is both for the father and the mother, where they compromise on a lot of their needs to make sure that their future generation are better educated and well off than they were. And it's all just a desire to grow alongside the planet, to grow as a community, like Sahar said, to come together and make sure that we all evolve as a community. It's not easy, but it's also not impossible. A lot of our communities have really come out, and a lot of families have really made efficient jumps in the social hierarchy of the system.
Yeah, great. It's really right, Fawzia, because I have been eyewitness that the women here are rearing the animals, cattle, and they are doing all the work related to those animals, and they are milking those animals, but they do not have enough milk for themselves to take. And even they are producing the babies, and their babies have not enough milk. And we are facing in Pakistan the stunted growth due to the unavailability of proper milk to the children. So these are some of the problems we need to obviously cater in case of the countries like Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and other Southeast countries. So today, as you all know, we are talking more about mother and mother nature, like women and this planet Earth. So I think all other domains are now being covered, but I just will have some suggestions from Sahar Hasnain, Dr. Sahar Hasnain, about how to save this mother nature from the climate change. That is a real disaster currently, and I'm really much worried that after pandemic, obviously we will have to face this climate change thing. And that is really not only disturbing our ecosystem, or that is not only disturbing the temperature, that is directly impacting agriculture. So how we will save this mother nature after when we will come out of this pandemic from the climate change? So Dr. Sahar Hasnain, your comments.
I mean, it's a very big question. And the first thing is that it's not like COVID stopped climate change from happening. And, you know, as farmers like Sahar and her team know very well, that everyone had to experience COVID plus lots of climate change disasters around the world. And I think like the main thing we need to do in terms of this is make sure that we're thinking of the environment in every decision we take, and know that, you know, when we're talking about sustainability of land use, we're talking over the next 500 to 1,000 years. And that has to be a huge part of all of our decision making. But yeah, if I had the answers, I would do them as well. But I'm looking towards people like all of you, especially Sahar's team, and, you know, experts like Fawzia and Viviana to really save us. So yeah, I think that's my comment.
So if anyone among the other panelists have any suggestions related to meeting the climate change problems, they can share their views.
I believe. Oh, you can continue.
No, Sahar, I think you deserve to go.
I think it's, you know, what I believe from the first-hand knowledge that I have gained, that people living in you know, in the reclusive area in which they don't have the access, they don't even have the knowledge. I think the main key is to educate them, because still they don't know that, you know, burning the residue is against law. It's against, you know, you are harming the mother nature. They don't have, you know, the basic knowledge about that. I think the education of the community is the top priority. If you give them the awareness that what they are doing to the nature, I'm sure, you know, there are some practices that we have done in our farm, especially in terms of water saving techniques that we have introduced, and they have been replicated across. It's not that, you know, it's limited to my farm only. There are multiple of the farms that have seen us doing the practices, and now they are, you know, educating their laborers as well. So it's, you know, it's one step, but it's, you know, first step, which is education.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Fawzia, if you want to add in.
Yeah, I would agree to it. I would agree to what Sahar has said. The communities are not educated in terms of how the weather patterns are changing, how it's impacting their yields, how to adapt to it, how can these technologies help them in proper decision making. So, for example, sometimes it rains only a day after that they water their crops, and then, you know, sometimes it rains when they're drying some of their produce from agriculture. So as long as there are all these tools that are made available to the farming community by proper open schools, women farming schools in general, that can go and educate them, I think it would be a brilliant idea for communities to adapt and come out of these situations. So not just mitigate, but also adapt as things happen, and make sure that they have enough produce in the end, and that the yield is not impacted so much, so that they can be financially stable as well.
Yeah. So Dr. Paraku, yeah.
Yes, I really wanted to jump in on something that Dr. Parveen was mentioning that I think is really critical. I think I mean, of course, keeping the amazing value that education and technical assistance have, it's also about making sure that whatever innovation or different practices, different knowledges that we are sharing are also beneficial to those that we want to engage, so that they use them, because we cannot expect change to happen by itself. And if we want to engage the farmers, we need to put in place practices and teach them practices that not only help the environment, but also sustain their livelihoods. Because otherwise, we cannot expect them to just do something for Mother Nature just because of itself, because of course, this is a very noble aim and objective, but we need to really keep their needs in mind in the first place, because otherwise any dialogue on this is going to be very sterile. And it's really important to make them our key allies in this action, just because it's not just good for the environment and for us, but it's good for them. So I think that's something that really needs to be kept in mind, and we need to really accompany this process.
Great, Dr. Parego. So we are having last 30 seconds. Thank you all, Dr. Sahar Hasnain, Dr. Parego, Dr. Sahar Iqbal, Dr. Fawzia. It was really nice talking to you, and it was really thought-provoking talk regarding agriculture sustainability, and we have highlighted such domains which need really attention. So thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.